Okay, this video is about eponyms in writing styles. Eponym means named after somebody. I wrote all about these in my book, Rhyme, Rhetoric, and Logic. This is the 4th edition of it. I wrote this book, gosh, it's got a lot of pages, 530 pages, when I was teaching myself how to become a better writer, because I had written already about 4 or 5 books, but I had a bunch of friends that are lawyers that were making fun of me that my writing style they thought was amateurish. And then when I analyzed what they said, they were correct, so I decided to really understand. I read everything I could on writing, all the essays, all the books, etc. And just here's one little thing about some writing styles based on the author's name, the eponym. Okay, Plato, what was interesting about him is he was a failed playwright, and he was a philosopher, but he wrote his philosophy in the form of a play, with Socrates being the lead hero. He kind of wanted to replace the idea of a brute hero like Achilles with a more intellectual hero. And Odysseus was rather intellectual in the Iliad and the Odyssey, but Socrates was much more intellectual, sort of an intellectual superhero, and in a play form where he'd have dialogues with students or other philosophers, and that was very appealing. And I wrote some of my books in that form before I learned how to illustrate. Illustration, I think, made my books a lot better. I didn't learn that until I'd written a bunch already. Thucydides was just an awesome book because Thucydides, he said, okay, screw me, I'm an ostracized admiral from the Athenian Navy. I'm just going to tell you the truth about what happened, so we'll have a record of how history goes down for all time. And it's a masterpiece. Because he's willing, as an ostracized guy, he gave essentially a historical summary with a little bit of ad lib into his dramatic speeches, like the funeral oration of Pericles on the greatness of Athens, okay? And he would contrast that right afterwards with some of the difficult times that Athens had, some of their bad behavior in Milos, as well as some of their difficulty with the plague and their behavior during the plague. But still, it's a magnificent book, the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. Okay, Aristotelian and rhetorical structures. He emphasized ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos. So ethos is ethics. The speaker is better if he comes from a moral high ground or appears to do so, has more credibility. Pathos, the emotion, that really stays with people. Logos, the logic, which he saw as very important between two aristocrats of Athens. But in real life, usually the people have much more differences, as does the audience. They're not two just aristocratic men of Athens. Kairos is the timing. And that's the classic. Aristotle summarized all the rhetorical techniques of the great speakers in Athens. And back in those days, it was a much bigger deal to be a great speaker. And students would be better off if they were trained for that, because you have to speak and talk all day long. Okay, the Ciceronian sentence in the writing style of Cicero is the periodic sentence that ends on a strong point, a strong, confident conclusion, how a confident, experienced professor would speak. And the classic Ciceronian sentence, also called a periodic sentence, is to not know what happened before you were born is to forever remain a child. So it's got that drama, high-level certainty, conclusive ending. If you want to learn about Cicero, the best way is to read the Harris Trilogy, the 3 books on him. They're great audiobooks. The Rufus Fears summary of Cicero are quite good as well. And this sort of led the periodic sentence ending on a confident note, like the Tyndalian style. Tyndale was a translator of the Bible, and really the King James Bible is essentially, most of it came from Tyndale's earlier translation. He pissed off the king, though. Anyways, and like a typical sentence is from Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, and John Ruskin then was the great English speaker, art critic. In his most magnificent speech is the 1853 speech on the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. It's magnificent. And so that Ruskin periodic sentence, Ciceronian style, it's awesome. Okay, Machiavellian is more dirty, ruthless, desperate man. Machiavelli was actually heroic in a sense. He was trying to save Italy from being destroyed by these outside national armies where the Italian city-states couldn't unify, and therefore they couldn't protect themselves from an outsider. The modern version of that would be like the 48 Rules of Power by Robert Greene, sort of just think dirty about something you need to know. And that's actually a great book, 48 Rules of Power. I think everybody should read that book. Everybody should read The Prince, too, just to kind of know how evil, powerful people think, okay? And they do think that way. You can bet the billionaire perverts think that way. Okay, 48 Rules of Power is the stuff you're going to encounter in your office situations and your personal life as well, so you should know it. Shakespearean drama is more like lofty characters, the royalty with their dramatic metacognition, like Hamlet's his best play, and the fatal flaw, the tragedy, and how you can think your way into things. It's a magnificent play, Hamlet. Voltaire is especially famous for being funny and antithesis, okay? So, you can just read his quotes. I don't think his books are that good. Candide, I think, is overrated. G.K. Chesterton was sort of a more modern version of Voltaire-like style with a lot of antithesis, strong contrast between things. and very funny and clever. He's more Christian than Voltaire. Ann Coulter is sort of the famous female version of it. There's irony and satire and very clever reverses of a phrase. Okay, Emersonian. And it's good to have all these writers' quotes because you get a sense, you get a feel of it, and then you're writing something and you feel a sentence coming into your mind. You're like, yes, that reminds me of so-and-so, and it works. Yes, I'll go with it. Because these rhetorical forms and sentence forms, writer styles, are like templates for when you get ideas to write your own. Emersonian, self-reliance, bold, confidence, surging optimism, the American scholar, trust yourself, think out loud. Okay, sort of an intellectual form of stream of consciousness. Oscar Wilde's style is a lot of chiasmus. I love the Irish fancy talkers. Guys goes into England and becomes the best playwright. It was awesome, okay? The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. He's got lots of sentences like that. The best thing to read by Oscar Wilde is the importance of being earnest. H.L. Mencken was an American writer, a little bit in that same style, except H.L. Mencken was almost so rude, sort of in your face, that he was funny. Modern version, a lighthearted, dry delivery style would be Rodney Dangerfield. Okay, Victor Hugo, real strong contrast between good and evil, almost like a fairy tale, but magnificently developed. He had very good, round characters. The contrast between good and evil, beautiful and ugly, and then the real noble characters versus the grotesque, like, the bishop in Les Mis, magnificent. Esmeralda, the beautiful in Hunchback of Notre Dame. Okay, let's see. Fyodor Dostoevsky. The big thing I get out of Fyodor Dostoevsky's writing style is lots of the positives, lines that flip back upon themselves that are so dramatically unusual, the details in describing a character that you remember him forever. Like, his description of the underground man. I'm a sick man, I'm a mean man, like a hunchback. Okay, kinds of weird things like that. The Grand Inquisitor. He also makes a real strong villain that you can't even tell whose side he's on. The Grand, Jesus Christ or the Grand Inquisitor, and that makes the whole description much more convincing when he makes his the evil person's arguments, powerful. That it takes a lot of effort to refute them. Henry Sienkiewicz, stream of consciousness style in Quo Vadis, where Vinicius, the Roman general, was dreaming about Lygia, the Christian princess, and it's so real. It's how a man thinks when he's falling in love and thinking to himself, she's the one. Okay, Tom Wolfe would be the modern equivalent of that, a Wolfian style, if you will. Again, stream of consciousness, but what is more unique about Tom Wolfe is he puts in onomatopoeia with all these situational descriptions, and they're magnificent. He's the best of the modern male writers in terms of literary style. He'd be the one I read, the one I would recommend to read. Okay, Edgar Allan Poe, powerful rhyme and rhythm, assonance, consonance, alliteration, all those techniques, internal rhyme, a haunting story with a repetition. And the modern version of him would be Eminem. Eminem, despite being a scumbag lowlife, he is a magnificent writer. You'd be amazed if you study his books. His poems, his songs, they're truly magnificent, his best ones, okay? The internal rhyme, assonance, consonance, alliteration. I remember that my kid was listening to that one time, and I was like, turn that crap off. If Van Gogh had to listen to that, he would have cut off his other ear. And my kid goes, no, Dad, Eminem's a genius. You should study him. And I did, and the kid was right. Eminem is a literary, poetic genius. Okay, Hemingway. Short sentences, parataxis. He's basically, the other side of the spectrum. On the one side of the spectrum, long-winded is purple prose, Victorian style. That's, Faulkner. And Faulkner is really overrated as a writer. He's not that good. Versus Hemingway had some really good stuff. A little bit too short. So one is minimalism of Hemingway, maximalism of Faulkner. And as an individual, it's good to vary your sentences, okay? Too much Hemingway is boring, okay? He was able to make it work for him, but I actually think he didn't reach his potential as a writer. Okay, Kafkaesque is sort of a faceless bureaucracy, this oppressive juxtaposition of the tedious and the surreal, the invisible, ruthless, crushing down hand of bureaucracy. Orwellian, authoritarian, surveillance propaganda, 1984 is magnificent. And, the extended metaphor of Animal Farm is also magnificent. Churchillian is sort of strong, short words, punchy, powerful words. And anyways, these are all some of the good styles. Me personally, I just use the concept of, I feel like I talk like I'm talking to an intelligent friend who's interested in the subject. And that works for me, and I love to throw in humor. I love sort of that Oscar Wilde style. If I think of something's funny, I just throw it in. Because I know if I was talking to my friend, that's what I would do. So anyways, being aware of these styles can help you as you develop as a writer. And the fastest way to get a sense of these writers is just look up their quotes. Look up their quotes. That's how I remember a writer. I remember their best quotes. And of course, sometimes if I've read their long novels, I'll remember their stories. Some novels are worth reading. You know, Les Mis worth reading. Victor Hugo's magnificent masterpiece. I also, Notre Dame, I just listen to the audiobook. If I don't have time to read the book, I listen to the audiobook. That's a lot easier to do when I'm commuting. Anyways, hope you found this helpful.